My sister Scarlett screamed that she was taking my spare rooms. When I refused, she hurled her wine at me, and my mother, Josephine, disowned me. I calmly left that Thanksgiving dinner and made one phone call to my lawyer. That night, I set a trap that would make them scream. And this time, I wouldn't be there to help. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The scent of thyme and roasted turkey, a smell I usually associated with warmth and comfort, felt like a suffocating blanket. It was Thanksgiving, and as was tradition for the last decade, I was hosting in my home, a house I had designed and built myself, a testament to a career I had forged from nothing. I was Alina, 45, a successful architect, and as I was so often reminded, the boring and serious one in my family. I was already on edge. A major commercial project had just entered its final inspection phase, and I had been working 70-hour weeks. I was emotionally and physically drained, running on fumes and the sheer will to give my family one perfect day. My mother, Josephine, 68 and retired, was already seated at the head of the table, a position she always took, holding court with a critical eye on the table setting. My sister, Scarlett, 39, and her husband, Lucas, 41, had arrived an hour late, full of breezy apologies and commotion. Scarlett, a lifestyle blogger, a term I mentally translated to chronically unemployed, looked flawless as usual, while Lucas, whose gig worker status meant he was perpetually between jobs, hovered nervously behind her. "Alina, darling, this gravy is a little thin, isn't it?" Josephine commented, swirling her spoon in the boat. Before I could reply, Scarlett chimed in, "It's fine, Mom, we have bigger things to talk about anyway." She clapped her hands together, a sharp, excited sound that put every nerve in my body on high alert. "So, we have the most amazing news. Well, sort of, it's a new beginning." I braced myself. Scarlett's new beginnings almost always preceded a request for a small loan that would never be repaid. Lucas cleared his throat, looking at his plate. "Well, you see, our landlord, he's a real piece of work. Long story short, our lease is up." "He's evicting us, Alina," Scarlett burst out, her breezy demeanor replaced with a sudden, sharp anger. "Just because we were a little behind, and he had the nerve to complain about damages. It's a total scam." I kept my expression neutral, placing the platter of green beans on the table. "Scarlett, that's terrible. What are you going to do?" This was the opening she had been waiting for. She smiled, a wide, predatory grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, that's the best part. We were thinking this house is just so huge." She gestured around the dining room, which opened into a large, 2-story great room. "I mean, you've got that entire wing upstairs. What is it, 3 extra rooms? You don't use them." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "What are you suggesting, Scarlett?" "We're moving in," she declared, as if announcing a surprise vacation. "It's perfect. Lucas and I will take the 2 main guest rooms, and the third one can be my new office for my vlogs. It'll just be for a few months, maybe a year, until we get back on our feet." The silence that followed was heavy. Lucas was still staring at his plate. My mother, Josephine, was watching me, her expression unreadable but expectant. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice low and calm. "Scarlett, I'm sorry you're in this situation. I really am, but no." Her smile froze, then melted into disbelief. What do you mean no?" "I mean, no, you can't move in," I said, more firmly this time. "This is my home, not a boarding house. I'm happy to help you look for a new apartment or even co-sign a lease if your credit is the issue, but you are not taking my rooms." "Co-sign?" Scarlett's voice rose to a shrill pitch. "We don't need a co-signer, Alina. We need a place to live. You have all this space and you're hoarding it for yourself. It's selfish." "It's not selfish, Scarlett. It's my home. My office is here. I have clients. I need my privacy." "Privacy?" she scoffed. "You're always working. You won't even know we're here." The answer is no. That's when it happened. Scarlett's face contorted with a rage that was terrifyingly childish. You always do this. You always act like you're better than us just because you have money. She picked up her glass, full of dark red wine. We're taking them. Scarlett, don't, Lucas whispered, finally looking up, his eyes wide with panic. But it was too late. With a furious scream, she hurled the contents of the glass directly at me. The cold liquid hit my face and chest with a shocking splash. Dark red wine dripped Rom my hair, stung my eyes, and soaked the front of my cream-colored silk blouse. The entire table gasped. I sat there, frozen, the smell of wine and thyme mixing into a sickening perfume. I slowly picked up my napkin from my lap. As I began to calmly dab at my face, my mother, Josephine, finally spoke. Her voice wasn't one of concern for me, but of cold, hard fury. "Alina," she hissed, her eyes blazing. "Look at what you made your sister do. She is in need, and you slam the door in her face. After everything we've done for you." I paused, the napkin halfway to my cheek. "What you've done for me." "You are a cold, selfish woman, Alina," Josephine screamed, rising from her chair. "She is your sister, your family. If you can do this to her, you're no child of mine." The words hit me harder than the wine. "You're no child of mine." I looked at Scarlett, who was breathing heavily, her face triumphant. I looked at Lucas, who was desperately trying to become invisible. And I looked at my mother, who was staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I finished dabbing my face, carefully folded the stained napkin, and placed it on the table. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping quietly against the hardwood floor. "You're right, Josephine," I said, my voice quiet but clear as a bell. "I'm not." I turned and walked out of the dining room. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, walked out into the cold November air, and got in my car. I didn't look back. The drive to my separate, private studio office, the one they didn't know about, was a blur. I sat in the dark, the sticky wine drying on my skin, and I let the shock wash over me. Then, the shock receded and something else, something cold and hard and clear, took its place. I picked up my phone. I didn't call a friend. I didn't call a therapist. I called David, the shark of a corporate lawyer who had handled my firm's contracts for the last 8 years. "David," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I'm sorry to bother you on Thanksgiving. I have a personal matter. I need you to draft 2 documents for me tonight. First, an eviction notice. Second, a demand for repayment." The betrayal was worse than the humiliation, and they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The silence of my downtown studio was a stark contrast to the chaos I had just left. My firm occupied the top floor of a restored heritage building, but I kept a small, private studio on the ground floor, accessible only by a separate keycard. It was my sanctuary, filled with drafting tables, architectural models, and the clean scent of blueprints and coffee. No one in my family knew it existed. To them, my office was the spare room in my house, the very one Scarlett had so casually claimed. I rinsed my face in the small bathroom, the cold water a welcome shock. The wine had stained my blouse, a beautiful piece I'd bought in Italy, and I felt a sharp, pointless pang of loss. I stripped it off, washing my skin as best I could, and pulled on a spare black turtleneck I kept in a locker. Looking in the mirror, I saw a stranger. My eyes were dark, not with sadness, but with a terrifying, icy resolve. The fixer, the reliable Alina, the family's emotional and financial shock absorber, was gone. She had been washed away with the Cabernet. My phone, which I'd set on the drafting table, began to light up. It was a barrage, a digital assault. "First, Scarlett, you're a monster. You can't be serious. Come back here and apologize to Mom." Then, "Lucas, Alina, please just calm down. She didn't mean it. Come back. You're ruining Thanksgiving." Then, Scarlett again, "Mom is crying. I hope you're happy. You've officially destroyed this family." And finally, "Josephine, don't you dare show your face here again. You are not welcome." I meant what I said. I watched the screen, my heart rate steady. In the past, these messages would have sent me into a spiral of guilt. I would have called, crying, apologizing, begging them for forgiveness. I would have offered them money, a hotel, anything to smooth it over, just to be allowed back into the fold, to be a good daughter again. But as I looked at the words, I felt nothing. It was like reading a weather report for a distant city. The phone rang, Josephine. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the notification popped up. I pressed play, putting it on speaker. Her voice, thick with performative tears and real rage, filled the studio. Elena, how dare you? How dare you walk out on your mother on Thanksgiving? Scarlett is beside herself. She is your flesh and blood. You have this palace all to yourself, and you won't even help your sister. I raised you to be better than this. You are a cold, cold-hearted snake. You have made your choice. Don't come crawling back to me when you're old and alone, because you will have no one. You have no family. The message ended. I saved it. I turned back to my computer, my conversation with Vid fresh in my mind. He was, as always, brutally efficient. An eviction notice for your mother? He had asked, his voice betraying only a flicker of surprise. Yes, she lives in the condo on Water Street. The title is solely in my name. I pay the mortgage, the utilities, and the HOA. Understood, and the demand letter. For my sister, Scarlett, and her husband, Lucas, let's start at $80,000. I'll email you the file. The file. I'm an architect, David. I document everything. And I had every wire transfer, every loan for a car repair, every covered rent check, every business startup fund. For 15 years, I had been documenting the one-way street of my family's finances. I'd told myself it was for budgeting, for my own records. But tonight, I knew the truth. Subconsciously, I had been building a case. My phone buzzed again, a new text from Scarlett. Mom is packing her things. She's coming to stay with me and Lucas wherever we end up. You've made your mother homeless. I will never forgive you for this, Elena. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. I almost laughed. Their lawyer with what money? I felt a sudden, sharp clarity, an architect's precision of thought. They had built their entire lives on a foundation of my guilt and my generosity. They had hammered at that foundation for years, taking, and I had let them. I had patched the cracks, reinforced the beams, and quietly paid for it all. Tonight, they had taken a sledgehammer to the main support beam, and they were about to find out what happened when the person holding everything up simply walked away. I pulled up the bank records, the title deed for Josephine's condo, and the meticulously organized spreadsheet of loans. I started composing the email to David. As I typed, an old memory surfaced. My father, just before he died, had taken my hand. He'd been a quiet man, an engineer, completely overshadowed by Josephine's drama. Elena, he'd whispered, his voice thin, don't let them drain you. Your heart is a house. Don't let them take it over. Keep a room for yourself. For years, I thought he meant emotionally. But as I attached the condo's deed to the email, I realized he might have been more literal. I sent the email. I turned off my phone, not just silenced, off. I spent the night in my studio, sleeping on the small cot I kept for all-nighters. For the first time in my adult life, I slept soundly, without the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. I dreamt of empty rooms, clean lines, and the quiet, solid strength of reinforced concrete. They always assumed I would just absorb it, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just the family bank. I was the architect. I owned the blueprints. The roots of this Thanksgiving disaster ran deep, back to our childhood. Josephine, our mother, had always been a woman of grand gestures and paper-thin stability. She craved the appearance of a perfect life, but lacked the discipline or desire to build one. She was a creature of high drama and higher credit card debt. Scarlett was her mirror. She was the pretty one, the fun one. She learned early that a bright smile and a well-timed tear could get her out of any trouble and get her into anything she wanted. I, on the other hand, was the serious one. I was plain, quiet, and good at math. I was reliable Elena. While Scarlett was at cheerleading practice, I was at home, balancing my mother's checkbook at the age of 14, trying to figure out which bill we could skip to keep the lights on. When my father died, I was 22, just finishing my architecture degree. The small life insurance policy he left was supposed to go to my mother, but at the reading of the will, he had left it to me in a trust with a single stipulation. to be used for the family's foundations. Josephine had been furious. He left it to you, he didn't trust me. But I understood. He wasn't talking about the foundation of a house, he was talking about our foundation. I used that money to pay off her debts. I used it to fund my graduate studies. And I used the last of it as a down payment on a modest duplex. I lived in one half and rented out the other. That duplex was the first foundation I ever built, and it was the start of my success. Scarlett, meanwhile, took a different path. She used her grief to drop out of the community college I was paying for, deciding she was going to be an actress. When that failed, she was going to be a designer. When that failed, she became a lifestyle blogger, which seemed to primarily involve her maxing out credit cards that I often paid off to buy clothes and brunch she could photograph for her handful of followers. Her husband, Lucas, was a rudderless ship. He was a pleasant, weak-willed man who was so dazzled by Scarlett's dramatic flair that he just drifted in her wake, enabling her worst impulses. My sacrifices became their expectations. When Scarlett needed a Yale laptop for her business, I bought it. When Lucas's car was repossessed, I fronted the money for a used one so he could get to his gigs. And then came the biggest sacrifice of all, my mother. 10 years ago, Josephine had been living in a terrible apartment complex, complaining constantly about the noise and the low-class neighbors. "I'm your mother, Alina," she'd wept. "I'm old. I deserve to feel safe." So I'd bought the condo, a beautiful 2-bedroom unit on Water Street with a doorman and a river view. I'd put her name on the lease as a resident, but the title, the deed, the mortgage, it was all mine. I paid every bill from the HOA to the cable. It was, I'd told myself, the foundation my father had wanted me to provide. The problem was, they didn't see it as a gift. They saw it as their due. My success wasn't mine. It was a family resource, a community pot they could dip into at will. And their interest in my assets had become distressingly blatant. Last summer, during a family barbecue, Scarlett had been wandering through my house, running her hand along the custom-built walnut cabinetry. "This place is just so much, Alina," she'd said, her voice dripping with a strange mix of envy and appraisal. "You should really sell it. You could downsize and just think of what you could do with the money. You could really help Mom. And me, I mean, my blog is this close to taking off." "I'm not selling my home, Scarlett," I'd said, laughing it off. "She's right," Josephine had added, coming up beside her. "It's an awful lot of house for one person. It's almost greedy." Greedy, that word again. I, who had funded their lives for 2 decades, was greedy for having a home of my own. That was the moment I started scanning my old bank statements. That was the moment I created the spreadsheet. Now, sitting in my studio, I pulled up that file. It was all there. 84,210.15 to be exact. I'd even included Lucas in the demand, as he was her husband and complicit in the lifestyle. David, my lawyer, had been clinical. "They won't be able to pay it, Alina. You know that. The goal here is leverage." "The goal," I'd replied, "is to draw a boundary, in concrete." David was already at work. By 9:00 a.m. Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, a process server would be waiting outside the Water Street condo. And a courier would be dispatched to Scarlett and Lucas's last known address, their evicted apartment, with a signature-required envelope. I'd also instructed him to email a digital copy to Scarlett's business email, the one I paid the hosting for. They had forgotten the most crucial thing. They saw me as a wallet, an ATM, a soft-hearted pushover they could guilt-trip. They had forgotten I was an architect. I built things, I understood structures, and I knew, better than anyone, exactly where the load-bearing walls were. They had just told me I wasn't part of the family. I was simply taking them at their word. I was removing my support, and I was about to watch the entire, rotten structure they called a life come crashing down. The sun rose on Friday morning, casting long, sharp shadows across my drafting table. I had not gone home. My house, the one I had designed as a sanctuary, felt tainted. The image of Scarlett's triumphant, hateful face, of the dark wine dripping down my own custom-milled cabinets, was seared into my mind. My studio was where I felt in control. I opened my phone for the first time in 12 hours. It was a wasteland of vitriol, dozens of missed calls, texts from extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, who had clearly been fed a poisoned narrative. From Aunt Linda, "Elena, I am deeply disappointed in you. Your mother is in hysterics. Call her AT once." From Cousin Mark, "Heard what you did. Kicking your sister out on Thanksgiving? Classless." They were right about one thing. My mother was in hysterics, but it wasn't because I'd kicked Scarlett out. At 9:05 a.m., my email pinged. It was a notification from David. Subject: Service complete. Body: Ms. Josephine, last name, was served with a 30-day notice to quit at 9:02 a.m. Courier has confirmed delivery and signature for the demand letter to Mr. and Mrs. last name at 9:04 a.m., forwarded from previous address. Digital copy also delivered. Awaiting contact. D. The scream I had been waiting for came 3 minutes later. This time, when Josephine called, I answered. "Elena." The shriek was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It was a sound of pure, undiluted panic. "What is this? What is this filth? A man just came to my door. He gave me eviction papers. This is a joke, right? This is some sick, twisted joke." "It's not a joke, Josephine," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "It's a legal document. It's a 30-day notice to vacate the property." Vacate. This is my home." "No," I said, and the clarity in my own voice surprised me. "It's my property. You were a guest, and your privilege have been revoked. You said I was no child of yours. I'm simply honoring that. Our relationship is terminated. That includes our financial relationship." You can't," she sputtered. "I'm your mother. The law won't allow this." "The law is precisely what is allowing this," I said. "The title is in my name. You are a tenant at will, and I am terminating that tenancy. David, my lawyer, can explain the details to your legal counsel should you choose to retain one." I heard a muffled sound, and then Scarlett's voice was on the line, even more shrill than her mother's. You witch, what did you do? I just got an email. $84,000. Is this blackmail? I'll have you arrested. This is harassment." "It's a demand for repayment of documented loans, Scarlett," I replied, pulling up the spreadsheet. "For example, the $5,200 for your lifestyle blogger website setup in 2018, the $12,000 to pay off your credit card debt in 2020, the $7,500 for Lucas's car. I have receipts for every cent. You have 30 days to propose a payment plan, or I will file in small claims court." "We don't have that money. You know we don't. You did this to destroy us." "No," I said, my patience snapping. "You did this to yourselves. You came into my home, insulted me, demanded my property, and assaulted me. You and Josephine backed her up. You thought I was your personal safety net. You've just learned the net is gone." "Mom is homeless," Scarlett shrieked. "Where is she supposed to go?" "I imagine she'll move in with you and Lucas," I said. "Wherever you land, you have 30 days to figure it out. Goodbye." I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was trembling, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. The shift from passive victim to active strategist was complete. But I wasn't done. They had called me greedy and selfish. They had accused me of hoarding. They had forgotten that as an architect, my greatest skill wasn't just building, it was investigating. I needed to know the full story. Why were they so desperate? A little behind on rent didn't usually lead to an immediate eviction, even with a bad landlord. I hired a private investigator, a discreet one recommended by David. "I want to know the real reason my sister was evicted," I told him. "And while you're at it, do a full background check on her husband, Lucas." It didn't take long, 2 days to be exact. The pie was thorough. The reason for the eviction wasn't just non-payment. It was non-payment for 6 months. The landlord had been trying to work with them, but they'd been dodging him. And the damages Scarlett had brushed off, they hadn't just been wear and tear. They had tried to do their own renovations to make the apartment more Instagrammable. including knocking down a non-load-bearing wall without permission. The damage was estimated at over $20,000. They weren't just broke, they were reckless and destructive. But the real bomb was Luca's. My quiet, weak-willed brother-in-law wasn't just a gig worker. He was a gambler. He had online accounts, a history of chasing losses, and a significant amount of high-interest debt in his name, separate from Scarlett's. That's where the money was going. My money, the money I'd given Scarlett for her business, the money she'd claimed was for rent. It was being fed into a digital black hole. Scarlett wasn't just entitled, she was either a fool or a co-conspirator. I now held all the cards. I had the eviction notice, the $84,000 demand letter, and now, the proof of their utter, catastrophic irresponsibility. The next time they came at me, and I knew they would, I wouldn't just be building a wall. I'd be showing them the rot in their own foundation. The day after the phone call, a Saturday, they showed up at my house. I'd been expecting it. I had spent the previous day at my studio, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. I needed to face them on my own ground. I was in my home office, the real one, not the guest room, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite chime. It was a frantic, repeated mashing of the button. I checked the security camera. Scarlett, Josephine, and Lucas huddled on my doorstep, looking windswept and furious. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and opened it. Before I could speak, Scarlett lunged forward, trying to push past me into the foyer. "You can't ignore us, Alina. You have to fix this." I didn't move. I'm taller than she is, and years of hauling blueprints and climbing scaffolding has given me a solid frame. I put a hand on her shoulder and held her firm. "You're not welcome in my house, Scarlett. We can talk on the porch." "It's freezing," Josephine shrieked, pulling her thin coat around her. "You'd make your own mother stand in the cold." "You're the one who disowned me," I said, my voice flat. "You're lucky I opened the door at all. You have 5 minutes." "You have to stop this." Scarlett's voice was a desperate raw. "SB, this eviction. You'll kill Mom. Her heart can't take this." "My heart is fine," Josephine snapped, glaring at Scarlett before turning her fury back to me. "This is abuse, Alina. Elder abuse. I'll go to the papers. I'll tell everyone what you're doing." "And what exactly am I doing?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Am I refusing to let you live rent-free in a $700,000 condo that I own and pay for? Yes. Am I refusing to fund your daughter's reckless lifestyle? Yes. I don't think that's abuse, Josephine. I think that's a boundary." Lucas, who had been silent, finally spoke up, his voice placating. "Alina, look, we know you're upset. Scarlett, she has a temper. The wine, that was too far, we're sorry. But it's an eye for an eye, it's too much." "Is it, Lucas?" I fixed my gaze on him. He visibly flinched. "Is it too much to be held accountable?" "Accountable for what?" Scarlett spat. "For being in a little debt, for having bad luck. You've always been lucky, Alina. You've always had everything. You don't know what it's like to struggle." The air went very still. The rage I had been holding back, the cold, controlled anger, finally surfaced. I laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound that startled all three of them. "Struggle," I said, my voice dangerously low. "You, who I've been funding since you were 19. You, who has never held a job for more than 6 months. You don't know the meaning of the word." I stepped back and pointed at Scarlett. "You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about the real reason you were evicted. It wasn't bad luck. It was 6 months of unpaid rent." Scarlett's face went white. Lucas looked like he was going to be sick. "And the damages," I continued, relentless. "You mean the wall you knocked down in a rental property? The $20,000 in repairs you've just stuck your landlord with?" How did you know that?" Scarlett stammered. He told you." "It doesn't matter how I know," I said. "I know, and I know you were hiding it. You came to my Thanksgiving, planning to dump your catastrophic, self-inflicted disaster in my lap and call it a new beginning. You didn't just ask for help. You demanded my home, and then you assaulted me when I said no." I then turned my full attention to Lucas. His eyes were wide, and he was trying to back away. And you, Lucas, you stood there and let her. You're sorry? Where was that apology on Thursday? Where were you when your wife was demanding my property? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. This is what they're not telling you, Josephine, I said, locking eyes with my mother. They're not just a little behind. They are in a deep, dark financial hole, and it's one they dug themselves. Scarlett's reaction was immediate. The shock wore off and the cornered animal came out. You spied on me, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You dug up dirt on me, you're trying to ruin me, you're jealous, you've always been jealous of me. You're a monster, a cold, unfeeling monster. The threats were pathetic, the lies obvious. It was the tantrum of a child who had been caught. Josephine just stared, her face ashen. For the first time, she looked uncertain, looking from my face to Scarlett's. She had no idea what to believe. Get off my property, I said. It wasn't a request. You're trespassing. You can't do this to us, Alina, Scarlett cried, a new, real desperation in her voice. We have nowhere to go. Mom has nowhere to go. You have 30 days to figure that out, just like you had 6 months to pay your rent. I stepped back inside and closed the door, the solid thud of the deadbolt echoing in the foyer. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, and listened to their muffled screams and, eventually, their retreating footsteps. That had been the first confrontation. The next one I knew would be the last, because I still hadn't played my final card. I still hadn't mentioned Lucas's gambling. That I was saving. That was the ace. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in desperation. Having failed to break me with a direct assault, Scarlett and Josephine launched a full-scale smear campaign. My phone, which I'd started answering again, became a rotating door of bewildered and angry relatives. Alina, Aunt Linda again. Your mother says you're selling her condo and she'll be on the street. Is this true? Alina, this is your Uncle Mike. Scarlett tells me you're suing her for money you gifted her. You need to stop this and be a family. Each time, I gave the same, calm reply. There is much more to this story than what they are telling you. I'm handling a private family matter, and I'm not going to be manipulated any longer. They, meanwhile, were panicking. Josephine, I learned, had tried to find a lawyer, but was told by legal aid that a landlord, even a relative, had every right to evict a tenant at will with proper notice. Scarlett and Lucas were, as I'd predict. Ed, staying with Josephine at the condo, the three of them rattling around in a pressure cooker of their own making, with the 30-day clock ticking. The smear campaign was their last, desperate attempt to use the family to shame me into submission, and it was escalating. The texts became more venomous, the voicemails from relatives more judgmental. I felt a familiar, crushing weight of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was I the monster they claimed I was? Then, the Pie's final report landed in my inbox, and my resolve hardened from concrete to granite. The report detailed Lucas's online gambling. He hadn't just been losing gig money. He had taken out 3 high-interest payday loans in Scarlett's name. He had, 6 months prior, forged her signature to take a $401,000 loan from a previous job she'd had, draining the meager $12,000 she had in it. He hadn't just been gambling, he'd been committing fraud against his own wife. And my $84,000 in loans had been the fuel for the fire. I looked at the report and I finally understood. Scarlett wasn't just a co-conspirator, she was a victim of her own terrible judgment. She had tied herself to an anchor, and he was dragging her to the bottom. But her pride and her lifelong habit of blaming me for her problems made it impossible for her to see it. The final confrontation came not from me, but from them. My Aunt Linda, my mother's older sister, called me. Alina, this has gone on long enough. I am calling a family meeting. My house. Sunday at noon. You, your mother, and your sister. We are going to end this. Aunt Linda, I don't think. I don't care what you think, she said, her voice stern. I'm not asking, be there. This is tearing our family apart and I won't have it. She hung up. I sat there for a moment. This was it. This was the public showdown they wanted. They were going to try to ambush me, to surround me with family, and use their collective judgment as a weapon. They were bringing a knife to a gunfight. I spent all of Saturday preparing. I didn't just print the Pie's report. I printed the bank statements. I printed the title deed to Josephine's condo. I printed the itemized spreadsheet of the $84,000. I printed the threatening text messages. I printed the photos of the damages from their landlord, which the Pie had acquired. I made 5 copies. I put each one in a neat, professional binder. When I walked into Aunt Linda's house on Sunday, the atmosphere was thick enough to cut. Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike were there, looking grim, and on the sofa, positioned like a tribunal, sat Josephine, Scarlett, and Lucas. Scarlett looked smug. She thought this was her victory. Josephine looked like a tragic victim. Lucas just looked terrified. "Elena, thank you for coming," Aunt Linda began, gesturing for me to sit in a hard-backed chair opposite them. "Now this has to stop. Your mother is sick with worry. You're evicting her." "I am," I said, my voice calm. "And you're suing your sister." "I am demanding repayment for documented loans, yes." "This is not how we treat family," she said, her voice rising. "You're right," I said. "It's not." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the 5 binders. I handed one to Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike. I slid one across the coffee table to Josephine, one to Scarlett, and one to Lucas. "What is this?" Scarlett sneered, but her hand was trembling. "That," I said, "is the truth. That is the file I've prepared for my lawyer. But since you wanted a family meeting, I brought copies." I watched them open the first page. Their faces told the story. Aunt Linda's eyes went wide. "Elena, is this the deed to the condo? It's only in your name." "It always has been," I said. "For 10 years, I've paid every cent. Turn the page." They saw the itemized list of loans, the bank transfers, the credit card payoffs. $84,000? Uncle Mike whispered, looking horrified. "Turn the page," I said. They saw the photos of the destroyed apartment, the gaping hole in the wall. "My God," Aunt Linda murmured. "Scarlett, what did you do?" "She's lying," Scarlett shrieked, throwing the binder on the floor. Those are fakes. She's trying to frame me." "Am I?" I asked, then turned to the last section, tab E. I looked directly at Lucas. He had gone a sickly, pale green. He was staring at the report in his lap, the one detailing his online accounts, the payday loans, the forged $401K withdrawal. "Scarlett," I said, my voice soft but piercing. "Ask Lucas where the money went. Ask him about the payday loans he took out in your name. Ask him about your $401K. Scarlett, who had been screaming at me, stopped. She turned slowly to her husband. "Lucas, what is she talking about? What $401K? Lucas couldn't speak. He was just staring at the paper, his whole body shaking. "Lucas," Scarlett shrieked, grabbing his arm, "what did you do?" And that's when he broke. He dropped his head his hands and began to sob, a raw, gulping, pathetic sound. I'm sorry. I was going to win it back. I was going to pay it all back." The room was utterly silent, broken only by his sobs. Scarlett stared at him, her face a mask of dawning, abject horror. Josephine looked like she had been struck by lightning. Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike just looked at me, their faces full in a way I had never seen. Respect. The spell was broken. The image of poor, unlucky Scarlett and selfish, greedy Elena was shattered. The truth, in all its ugly, documented detail, was on the coffee table for everyone to see. The family meeting at Aunt Linda's house had become a courtroom, and I was the one who had presented the irrefutable evidence. Scarlett's smugness had evaporated, replaced by a gray, hollow shock. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Her entire world had narrowed to the sobbing, broken man beside her. You gambled it," she whispered, her voice trembling. My $401K, the money from Elena, it's all gone." Lucas just nodded, unable to speak, his shoulders heaving. Josephine, for her part, was utterly speechless. Her entire narrative of her victimhood, of my cruelty, of Scarlett's entitlement, had been systematically dismantled. She was staring at the binder in her lap as if it were a bomb. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, and for the first time I saw not anger but fear. She had finally realized that the person she had alienated was the only one who had ever truly supported her. Aunt Linda was the first to speak. Her voice, usually so quick to judge me, was now dripping with cold fury, but it was aimed entirely at my sister and her husband. "Scarlett, Lucas, you are con artists," she said, her voice low and shaking. "You've been lying to this entire family. You've been bleeding Alina dry for years, and all while you've been doing this." She gestured to the report to Lucas. "And you, Josephine, you enabled it. You sat there on Thanksgiving and screamed at her. You disowned her for this." I didn't know," Josephine stammered, wringing her hands. "I didn't know it was this bad. Scarlett, she just said they were in a slump." "You didn't want to know," Uncle Mike boomed, standing up. "It was easier to blame Alina. It's always been easier to blame Alina. She's the one who works, the one who saves, so she's the one you all stick with the bill." He turned to me, his face softened. "Alina, I am so sorry. I had no idea." I just nodded, accepting the apology. And then, the moment I had been waiting for. The final, triumphant break. Scarlett, in her horror, finally turned her rage away from me and onto the actual source of her problems. She stood up slowly. She looked at Lucas, who was still crying. "You," she said, her voice dead, "you ruined us, you took everything." She didn't hit him, she didn't scream at him, she did something far more chilling. She turned to me. Her eyes were empty, but the fight was gone. "Is the eviction, is it real?" she asked. 30 days, Scarlett, that's what the law requires. That gives you 12 more days. And the 84,000. "That's the leverage, Scarlett," I said quietly. "I'm not going to force you into bankruptcy, but I'm also not your bank anymore. You and Lucas, you're on your own." Then she looked at her mother. "Mom, you have to choose." Josephine looked up confused. "Choose? What do you mean, darling?" "Choose," Scarlett said, her voice cracking. "Are you coming with me and him, or are you going to stay here and beg your no-child to take you back?" It was the ultimate test, and Josephine, in a moment of stunning, predictable cowardice, made her choice. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Alina, baby, you can't let me go. I'm your mother. I'm old. I have nowhere to go. Scarlett, she can't take care of me, not now." Scarlett let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Of course. She looked at me, at her mother, at her ruined husband. "You're all monsters." And with that, she grabbed her purse, walked to the front door, and left. She didn't slam it, she just left. Lucas, startled out of his crying, looked up in a panic. Scarlett, wait." He scrambled to his feet, gathered his own binder of evidence, and ran out the door after her. We were left in the living room. Me, my aunt and uncle, and my mother. Josephine was now openly weeping. "Alina, please," she whispered. "Don't put me on the street. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. You're my child. I looked at her, the woman who had disowned me, the woman who had enabled my sister's theft for decades, the woman who, given the choice, would always choose the easiest path. I stood up and gathered my things. I put my copy of the binder back in my briefcase. "You have 12 days, Josephine," I said, my voice devoid of a emotion. "You can stay with Aunt Linda, you can go with Scarlett, you can find a shelter. But at noon on the 30th of the month, the locks on that condo will be changed and your belongings will be put in storage. You are right, you are my mother, and I will not let you be on the street. I will pay for a room for you, at a long-term stay motel. That is my final offer." Aunt Linda looked at me shocked. "Alina." "That's my offer," I repeated. "She will not live with me, and she will not live in my property. She disowned me. I'm just setting the terms of our new relationship." I looked at Josephine. "The choice is yours." I walked out of the house, leaving her sobbing in the hands of my aunt. The weight of my entire family, a burden I had carried for 25 years, finally lifted from my shoulders. I got in my car, and for the first time since Thanksgiving, I let myself cry. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release. I was, at last, completely and totally free. The downfall was as swift as it was predictable. Scarlett and Lucas disappeared for a few days. I learned later from Aunt Linda that they had a massive, public fight at the condo, and Scarlett finally left him. She moved in with a friend from her blogger days, effectively vanishing from the family. Lucas, left with nothing but his gambling debts and my demand letter, went back to his parents' house in another state, a broken man. I had my lawyer formally drop the demand against Scarlett, but keep it active against Lucas. I didn't expect to see a dime, but it would hang over his head for years, a permanent record of his actions. My mother, Josephine, was a different story. After a week of tearful, manipulative phone calls to me, which I did not answer, she finally accepted her fate. She refused my offer of the motel. It was beneath her, she told Aunt Linda. Instead, she did exactly what I predicted. She moved in with Aunt Linda, turning my aunt's guest room into a shrine of her own victimhood. Aunt Linda, to her credit, tolerated it with a weary sigh, her eyes now wide open to her sister's true nature. The 30th of the month arrived. At noon, as promised, the locks on the condo were changed. I hired a company to professionally pack all of Josephine's belongings and move them to a high-end, climate-controlled storage unit. I paid for the first 6 months. After that, it was up to her. With the condo empty, I immediately put it on the market. It sold in less a week in a cash offer bidding war. Then I sold my house. The beautiful, custom-built home that held the memory of that horrible Thanksgiving. I couldn't stand to be in it anymore. It sold for an astronomical price to a tech executive. I took the proceeds from both sales, severing my last physical ties to my old life. And I did what I had secretly dreamed of for years. I bought a sprawling, open-concept industrial loft in the city's old warehouse district. It was all brick, exposed steel beams, and massive 20-foot windows. It was mine. Utterly, completely mine. I spent the next month designing the interior, a perfect blend of minimalism and comfort. My reconciliation was not with my family. It was with myself. I reconnected with old friends. I took a 2-week vacation to Japan to study temple architecture, and I threw myself into my work, which no longer felt like an escape, but a passion. The first holiday, Christmas, was fast approaching. I was bracing myself for the wave of guilt, the familiar ache of a broken family, but it never came. On Christmas Eve, I was in my new loft. The city lights glittered outside my massive windows. I had classical music playing, a fire crackling in the modern fireplace, and I was sketching a new design for a public library. My phone, which was now blessedly quiet, buzzed with a text. It was from Aunt Linda. "Merry Christmas, Alina. Your mother is being herself. But Mike and I are thinking of you. We're proud of you." I smiled and texted back, "Merry Christmas, Aunt Linda. Thank you. That means the world to me." I poured myself a glass of very good, very expensive wine, not Cabernet. I stood at the window, looking out at the world I had built for myself. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I was not a daughter, I was not a sister, I was not a fixer. I was just Alina, and I was finally at peace.